All right. Welcome to the show. Welcome, Henry Mobley, to Heroic Hospitality.
Thank you.
Well, first, I just wanted to have you on because you've just been an inspiration to me, especially recently, which I can't wait to talk about kind of our history journey, how we met, and how awesome that was in Moab, that trip that we met in Moab. And how we met was pretty funny and pretty awesome.
Yep.
And one of my best friends was driving like a 2023 Razor, and we were in Moab.
Yep.
And it was his first time driving the Razor. I was in the back. I had already driven because we were rotating on on a quad, right? And then here's this guy in the passenger seat basically yelling at my best friend. But then to find out you have this history of driving and being... Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
I'm Henry Mobley, and Mario, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for just having me here.
Of course.
The story was fun. We were in Moab. We were doing Razor driving, and I'd actually never driven a Razor before.
Yeah.
I'd never been to Moab before. I just moved to Colorado, I think 2 months before that trip. So everything was new to me.
I didn't realize that was that.
It was super early, and
Cool.
I still don't believe that Moab is a desert, because that much green, there's no way that that's a desert.
It's the first time in like 12 years it was like that.
Whatever.
Right?
I'm not convinced. And so I think we were rotating through our Razors in our groups, and I was in the front with our friend. And after driving a lap with him, I just noticed that he was a really solid driver, but he really wasn't committing to the course and what we were doing. And I have some experience in doing some navigation work and Class D, like driving, rally driving, just around the streets in Seattle. And I don't really know if I asked him, but I just started to coach him as a nav driver would do as a navigator would do for
which
the
you've
driver.
done before.
Which I've done before.
Yeah.
And so it was really just an opportunity for him to start to see and commit to what he was doing. And you notice that the turns became more fluid.
Yeah.
The speed increased significantly. We started having a hell of a lot more fun, and he chopped off something like 11 or 12 minutes off of the run, like a ridiculous amount of time. And it really came down to him owning that you're driving this thing, you're doing this thing, and let's commit to everything. It came to owning that the path that you're taking is yours, and that if you're going to do this, let's do it to the best of our ability.
That's awesome. And going through that process, being a passenger, witnessing kind of what was going down, which was pretty awesome, right? We hung out that night, and I was like, "What do you do? Tell me your story?" Because that was kind of frustrating being a passenger, because I was like, "Who is this guy? What's he doing? Give me like the story." And then we ended up just having a blast, camping in the middle of nowhere and getting to know each other under unique circumstances. And it was great. It was an amazing time. And so I was telling you a little bit about where I was in my journey. And so we started talking.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until something was going on with me that I just wasn't firing. I wasn't that on it. I wasn't that in touch with where I am and where I needed to be day to day, right?
Yep.
And so I reached out to you, and I kind of told you I was going through that. It kind of felt like when I had COVID, that brain fog in COVID.
Yep.
And we had 1 or 2 sessions, which were great, but they were like intro getting to know each other sessions. As you said, you just moved here. And so you started asking some good questions. I was like, you know what? You introduced me to your not quasi partner, but partner in what you do from a health standpoint.
Yeah.
Shalise, which I haven't met yet, but we just talked on the phone.
You absolutely do need to meet her.
And I'm going to meet her this weekend.
Yes.
I think at Beacon. Yep. And so meeting, having you tell me about her, I was like, why don't I talk to her? Because I just had some blood work done.
Yep.
And my health was, I got like a less than perfect health report. And then when I was talking with her, she was actually probing me to get another blood test done. And then ultimately we unearthed that my thyroid is compromised. because of my liver and my pituitary. And so all these things were kind of working, but really that was the crux of some of my kind of, not brain fog, but that less than stellar, like motivation, focus, and performance. Right. And so, so yeah, you've been helping me now for what, 3 months?
Yeah.
Once a week for 3 months. You did take some time off to go to Burning Man.
Hey, somebody had to do it.
Yeah. You did it for both of us. And it was a unique burn because it rained this year. And you're one of the first people I talked to after the burn. And, you know, really distilling like the principles of Burning Man and like why we burn.
Yep.
And this wasn't the year for me, not for a lot of reasons, but hearing kind of your experience at Burning Man this year, and the challenges that arose. Because again, it's the first time it rained in what, like 13 or
something 16, like 10, 12 years,
something like that. And so, you know, we all go out there, and if you're not prepared to camp, then you're not prepared to go out there, right? Radical self-reliance. And we were talking a little bit about this earlier. And being self-reliant is so important up to a point, right? Because it's that reliance. And if it was radical self-reliance, there would be no business coach, right?
Right.
Even school, right? You could be reliant up to a point, but you have to pick up a book at some point. And so that like conversation of being reliant, but also being not only relied upon, reliable, but relying, right? And so what are some of your takeaways from Burning Man this year that you can share with us? I know we're going off topic.
Yeah, that's okay. It's okay, right?
Such a great time.
It's all on topic. I think to start off with it is, you know, when you relate to your health, and you don't know me from Adam, and yet I'm coming in a place of service of saying, hey, I have someone that you can talk to. And I think when we talked, I said, it's not going to charge you. She's near to my house. And I want you to talk to her, because at the end, what's the adage? If every one person just took care of 2 people, the whole world would be covered, right? And it doesn't really take a whole lot. And so when you take those kind of look at the principles of, let's say, Burning Man, you talk about radical self-reliance, and it is to a point, yeah, you need to get yourself there. You need to do all the things. You pack all your food and everything else. But then why doesn't everyone camp by themselves, right? You wouldn't even have the whole organization of everything if people weren't relying on each other. So there's a bit of a misnomer in all of that, it's all about that. I think to your point, it is to a point. It's that, are you showing up fully to the best of your capacity, right? Because there's also, remember, everyone has a different capacity.
Right.
Are you showing up
and
fully?
Skill set.
And mindset and everything else. Are you showing up fully to this experience that then allows you then to participate, because that's what this is all about, right? The whole reason the event works is because of all of this participation. If you're doing that, and you're doing that in all the facets of your life, well, then you're showing up as the most powerful person you can be at the time and in that moment. And I think that ultimately is what everyone is trying to aspire to. There's no perfection. It's really about, are you at your capacity? Are you doing that? And then maybe can we start to push it a little more, right? And I think that you need to feel that. You need to feel where your boundaries are so that you can start to push against them. It's just like building a muscle, right? You have to have that resistance. You don't build a muscle by lifting.
That's why I knew I needed to reach out to you. That muscle, for some reason, I was feeling that fatigue.
Yeah, and that was the deal.
Please,
Well, and so once we started talking, you started realizing that you had the health things around you, but remember, Mario, you've been in the hospitality industry for a couple decades now. You've had success in a variety of different places. You've been able to facilitate not only your own projects, but other people's projects. But the only way you do that is that every time, at some point, whether it was conscious or subconscious, you ran up into a boundary of your skill set, your capacity, and anything else, and you made the conscious choice to push beyond that. Whether that meant you did something on your own, you reached out to someone for help. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about, if you have a vision of your life, you have a vision for the people you want to serve. I know how desperately you want to serve the community and be there for that.
The podcast is a good example.
Great example. So you're taking it upon yourself to do all of these things to push out where you can be more self-reliant in order to be of greater service to others.
Reliable.
Right? And that's the deal.
It's amazing. I mean, you're so eloquent with your words. I love hearing you speak, and that's one of the main reasons I wanted you on here. To make that's not hard to make you to have a conversation with you, especially regarding like really thoughtful processes. And you've helped me a lot, almost immediately, with the resources that you have at your disposal. Shalise.
Yep. Yeah, it's a tough one.
I say her name wrong because
she will,
I still haven't met her yet.
She will tell you it's a tough
Okay,
name.
good.
It's a tough name to do.
Good. And I'd love to share a little bit about. I'd love to have like a little like banter back and forth on like why do we need people like you in our lives, and why is a monetary exchange important, right? Because I could tell you why I think a monetary exchange is important, because we're friends, right? I could reach out to you if I had advice, and we wouldn't need to have a monetary exchange between us, but you're literally coaching me once a week. I have homework assignments, I have due diligence reports, I have accountability, and I think that was one of the main reasons why I reached out to you, is because I was lacking a little accountability when it comes to really pushing the needle forward, because I am trying to take on a lot. Opening a new club, starting this podcast with a great team, and we still have Beacon to go. And I have an obligation to the people that work here. If they want to learn, grow, advance, open their own thing one day, or become a better whatever it is, right? And so a monetary exchange is important because the accountability becomes a lot more real, because people don't like to throw money away typically. I haven't met someone that does anyway.
No, that's what I checked.
And is there another reason or another way that we can hold each other accountable outside of like not feeling the value of some, like, you kind of see what I'm saying? Is there?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is I always try to be the dumbest person in the room, right? So surrounding yourself with where you want to be is critically important. So that alone, that creates an energetic exchange of just being in each other's space. Money is valuable, but there's nothing more valuable than time and energy, as far as I'm concerned. At least on this frame and this planet, we've only got a limited amount. Who knows what the next thing is going to be. So if you're giving me your time, I'm giving you my time. That's worth far, far more, right? Because you can always go make more money, but you can't really make more time. At least as far as that constructs goes. So I think it's really important for us to be surrounding ourselves with what we want to be. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're idolizing, but it does mean that if you can see, hey, this person is doing what I want to do, they're doing it in a way that I want to do it, then having that connection is very, very, very important. And that oftentimes goes above and beyond money. With that being said, as a consciousness coach, as a psychedelic integration specialist, whatever titles I may give myself of what I do, if it's energetic, if it's trade, if it's money, it's important that people understand that there is an inherent value. In fact, I remember that when we started working together and I said, hey, how much do you want to pay? And you came up with a number. And remember the first thing you said was, this will be painful for me. Right? And it's like, great. That's a great place to start.
It is.
And you show up every week. And you get the things done most of the time. So we keep it right most of the time. And you start to see that not only is it important for the sessions we do, but what you're really understanding is that what you do in between our sessions is so critically important. You understand that what you're doing is not just for yourself, but for the 40 people that work at Beacon.
Soon to be 40.
Right? Soon to be 40, right? And then all the people that'll be working at the new site and all the things you're going to do. You start to understand that the money you're paying is not just about the sessions we're having. It's really about amplifying all these other things, which makes it also critically important to do that.
It's so important. It's so important to me to be able to show up for the leadership and the employees and team members at Beacon. Who would be, why do you think I was a good candidate for coaching?
The first and foremost, because you asked. It's easy for people for you to get the email or in spam mail, do this, do that, and everything else. But you sought me out, even in that immediate conversation. In fact, you didn't, like I said, you didn't know me at all. And whatever was going on, you showed that right then and there, you were serious about doing this. And even the fact that after we met, there was about 3 weeks before we even had our first discovery call.
I pushed it back a lot.
You kept pushing it back because you were dealing with some stuff, but I never felt like you put me off. And most of the things we do in our life, let's be real, it's all feelings. Right? 95% of everything we do is feelings, and the other 5% is the thoughts we have to justify the feelings that we already made, right? Everything.
More than likely you make them up.
Yeah. Exactly. So, but the fact is you kept pushing it off, but at the same time you kept encouraging me, but I want to do this, I want to do this. And I held faith in you. I don't take clients from mass emails. I take very specific clients for very specific reasons. I take clients who inspire me. Right? I could service all sorts of people, but I take my work seriously. And for me to upskill my work, I have to work with people that are doing big, complex, heavy lift things that scare them, things that are out of their purvey. If I'm doing that, it's not only servicing them, but I'm servicing myself, which is important.
If it's not mutual in some way, shape, or form, it's not worth it.
It's almost not sustainable.
Yeah.
People wonder, why am I burnt out? Why don't I want to do this? And I often find that you didn't vision big enough. It needs to be so big, so bright, so great that any storm, any naysayer, it doesn't matter, because the vision is that bold and that big. And so I always invite people is that if you don't have a vision, if you end up being a client with mine, you don't have a vision, that's the first thing we start off with. What are we doing? And then the second thing is, how can we articulate it? Because there's that divine, we talk about that, the divine, but there's also the reptilian. And the reptilian needs math and schedules and repetition and all those things. It needs articulation. It needs the words. The body needs to hear it. So if you can't articulate your vision, then we do that first, because that's what's going to hold you as you move forward.
Right. That's amazing. You know, the other thing I found that, you know, as I come across people in my life that I know need help, I see that they have so much potential. And that's the first thing I recognize. And then I see some of their opportunities. I used to interject myself and be like, hey, have you thought about doing it this way? Or like try to offer some guidance or advice for something that worked for me in a specific situation. But I've stopped doing that 100%. And then I ask them, hey, do you want feedback? I'm very specific on how I
get the invitation.
Get the invitation, because not everybody is ready to receive guidance.
Absolutely. Right. And you may
is there things that you do to poke holes in that, or to identify that yourself? Like, is this a client of mine that I could get behind?
Yep.
Like, how do you what's your filter when it comes to that?
There's a couple. So with any new client, I take a discovery call, right? And you and I had that. I also use a document that I call a well-formed outcome. And I think I remember you giving it to you, and it's 6 questions. And the questions aren't designed to trick you, but what they are designed to do is to make you have a conversation with yourself that you might not have had. And how that gets answered, and then how the discovery call goes, in about 45 minutes, I can tell whether or not we should work together. And remember, this doesn't mean that you wouldn't be a great client. If I don't believe, not know, because I've got lots of tools and things and stuff. But if I don't believe that I can exponentially move you to that vision, then I don't want to work with you. I want to help you find the person that you should work with. Right? It may not be me. The voice that you hear, the voices that you let in, the circle that you curate, is so powerful. And when you do a great job of that and not feel any certain sort of way just because somebody's not in your circle, once you realize that, and that it's okay to curate that, your life just expands beyond limits.
That's amazing. That's so true.
It's cool. It allows you to work in the macro instead of working the micro. And we talked about that. I rely on, back to the reliance thing, I put myself in a place where I have very reliable people that take off so many things in my life, all those micro decisions that just exhaust you, allowing me to work in the macro. I get to work in my realm of genius every day, where I can do the most, even including serving them. You start putting yourself in that place, every day is a joy, every day is an opportunity, every day is, I wish the day was just longer so that I could do more of this stuff. So many people have been convinced through their own beliefs, their familial beliefs, cultural, ethnic, societal, that they have to do X, Y, or Z. And the first thing that we shatter when working with me is all of that. That whatever belief system, whatever operating system, just like a computer, you've been working on since you were at 4, you don't need it at 40. So let's just change it. It's a different
set of rules.
It's a different set of rules, and it's okay. They're just narratives. That's all they are. And the same power of the narrative of who you want to spend your life with can be the same power of what you want to have for lunch.
Yeah.
And once you understand that those narratives are malleable, once you understand that you are the single source of divine energy that powers all that, once you understand you are effing God in the center of your universe,
yeah.
and then we operate that with awareness, accountability, and then action, bam. Everything shifts, everything changes. And what's cool is that you can do this at any part in your life. I don't care if you're just starting out. I don't care if you've made millions and exited companies. All of us have that ability to then utilize this then to get to that next thing we want to do.
You know, you've done such a great job of helping not only me, but countless others. What do you do for like that self-evolution and growth?
Same thing. I've got coaches and I have a variety of coaches that I go to for different things. But I think that the number one thing we talked about before is it's all on me.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, it's all on me. There is no one coming to save me, and I don't want anyone to come to save me. It puts me into a place of constant questioning. There's nothing that I hold so dear, nothing, not even the love of my mother, that cannot be questioned.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that after the questioning, I still won't hold it, but everything is up for questioning. That ensures, at least to the best of my ability, that I don't become stagnant, that I don't become blinded by the things that have been working, because sometimes what got you here, it's not gonna get you there.
It's funny, you know, one thing I could tell, like all my friends, all my really close friends, my inner circle, they all have one thing in common. Well, probably a lot of things, but like one thing that is coming to mind now is this idea of being a lifetime learner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we're saying the same thing,
Absolutely.
but that's just my language behind it. And I think that whenever there is like inconsistencies in the world, when it comes, whether it's an economic downturn or the pandemic or anything that's like really massive that shifts your life and shifts everybody around you, investing in yourself should be your number one. It should be your number one. And it's insane to me that people don't look at it that way.
They don't. And the airplane metaphor, put the mask on yourself before helping everyone else, right?
So I think if somebody were to, that was listening to this, were to get, you know, come away from one thing, it's that investing in yourself. And what does that mean? It could mean something as simple as picking up a book and reading a chapter or a half a chapter.
Anything.
You know,
one of the things I mentioned, I was fortunate enough, and I do say fortunate, that in my collegiate years, I started in the hospitality industry. I was a server. And one of the things that we talked about is that you have staff, you have young staff. Oftentimes it's an entryway into the job, into the workforce, I'm sorry. And oftentimes people just find themselves like, oh, I'm just a server, right? I'm just a bartender at, down at Beacon or whatever have you. Like, nope, you're a divine being.
Yeah.
Like, let's not get it twisted. This is what you do. It's not who you are.
You're a special person.
You are.
That's just what you do,
it's
not
what
who
you do.
you are.
And so it's really about how are we being versus what are we doing.
Yeah.
And this type of powered self-evolution, this type of going in and up-leveling yourself or reaching out, having those conversations, that is available no matter what your job title is. And so one of the things that I know we talked about is how in the work that we're doing together, how is that going to trickle down into your staff?
Yes.
Right? How are they going to get not just the benefits from your leadership and everything you're doing, but in the conversations they're going to have with you, in the conversations you inspire with themselves, that understanding that working with you and working at Beacon and working in your new venture, this is going to be different than any other hospitality place you could work, because we are not only interested in what you do, we are actually truly interested in who you are and who you want to become. And that is only going to benefit, like, let's just get brass tacks. If everyone in your staff is doing that, the customers will feel it, the vendors will feel it, and then guess what happens? Money overflows. So if we're just being completely...
Or abundance. You could say abundance too.
There'll be all abundance in all the ways. So if we're just concerned about that, about how can we make the most money, how can we have the most abundance to live in that, and that's all there, it's doing the same work, and everyone should always feel empowered to do it.
Really, it's true. It's funny. But it goes back to, too, is like not everybody is ready or sees that.
Or is offered it, though.
Or is offered it,
And that's a big part, is that we have a lot of people who go through their lives. I've done some work with folks, and they'll come out of a session, people who are very successful, long tenured in their work, and they'll say, no one's ever spoken to me like that. No one's ever allowed me to look at myself like that. There's this idea that we are trying to scramble towards enlightenment. And I offer that we started off in enlightenment, and that it has just been all of these various barriers, these tactile human barriers that are keeping us from there. Mm-hmm. So I offer to you, you're not trying to get to the big ball of light. You are. Let's just remove the things to allow you to be there. And when you start looking at that way and empowering people to understand that that's where you are, that all the answers are within you, you look at their faces, and it's like a brand new conversation with them, and then for them with themselves.
Yeah, it's very empowering to be the person that's able to offer that, and I get a lot of reward off of that too. So it's a two-way street, just like you said. You
100%.
choose your clients, and people that work at Beacon, we obviously go through the interview process and choose them as well, and we're going to be choosing another whole 20 new people.
You got a lot to do. And so in a lot of the work that we're doing, you're going to be able to take those into the interview process. You're going to be able to offer it to other folks that come to you for consulting and say, like, hey, let's take a holistic look at your business. Let's look at, because what are businesses and what are organizations? They are nothing but an entire amalgamation of a bunch of people. So however we're treating the people and however those people are operating is ultimately a reflection of how the business is going. Yeah. So as everyone noodles and like, oh my God, how do I get my business? The first thing I look at is, how are your people? First and foremost, how are your people? And I'm not saying you need to get into their lives and their personal lives and everything else. What I'm saying is when they walk through those doors, how are they? Yeah. Right? Do they feel empowered to be here? Do they feel confident to be here? Do they feel seen, known, heard, loved? Mm-hmm. If there are gaps in those things, doesn't mean you have to do them, but it just means that there are gaps in the business, which ultimately is going to affect the bottom line.
One of the things I've been working on, I have one employee particularly, one team member particularly, we had a great conversation the other day, and it was about checking in with yourself and like understanding where you are in your day and like how you show up to work. And I was expressing to her, trying to offer guidance, because she said that she came in and her mindset was great, but she wasn't ready for a busy night. And so she wasn't like mentally prepared because it was a Sunday, and she kind of had a Sunday mentality, which is just like the worst. I mean, that's kind of like one of the like kiss of death for most any situation, whether it's you've been married for 10 years and it's just, part of the routine, coming home again. Hey, it needs to be like, how do you spark that? How do you check in with yourself before you work? And when I come into Beacon, anytime after 11, I have to pay very close attention to not just going into like full work protective mode of like, is everyone having a good time? Is everybody safe? It's like, no, slow down, hug your employee, do my normal thing with, hug it out, high five, all the things. And then, squash that desire to do what I would want to do, which is hit the ground running, which is not okay.
And just reading the room and understanding what's going to be the most sustainable. I've had the fortune, I've been working with a new company, like a dear friend, colleague. Her name is Dr. Brandy Zachary, and she has a company called the Functional Medicine Academy. And I'm doing some work with her, and she has at the end of each day for various parts of her staff, her MSAs, they have a checklist. How were you physically today? How was your biology? How were your conversations? Right? Open-ended questions that they check in with to find out how best they are serving their clients, right? How best that they're serving the business and everything else. And any version of that, and encouraging a version of that, like it doesn't have to be a form necessarily, but by encouraging that with your employees, you're doing them such a wonder, because at the end of the day, they're still people, and people want to know that they are being seen, known, heard, and loved. And that's a variant of that. And if you're not doing that, that is one of the easiest but most powerful ways to really up everything in your organization.
Yeah. Because to say it is one thing. There's a lot of people that have great
intentions,
words,
yeah,
you know,
but to put it into practice,
but
and we
to put it
talk
into
about
practice
that.
is really hard.
And it is practice. And that's the other thing I try to tell people is it's okay if you're not good at it.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're aware of it, this is back where the radical self-reliance comes in.
Yeah.
No one can make LeBron James, Michael Jordan practice. No one can make them practice.
Right.
They had to show up every day to practice. You know, there's great stories. I'm a basketball fan. There's great stories about Kobe Bryant, like being there 4 a.m, already having practice before people had come in for practice. That was a thoroughly conscious decision. But at the same time, with all of that desire and grit and responsibility and accountability, they still had coaches, right? Even the best players,
and teams, of course,
the teams, the best players, the best executives, the best everything. They still have coaches. In fact, Forbes put out an article and they said that executives who can be coached, who are coachable, have far and away 30, 40, 50% greater success, make more money, have more longevity than executives who cannot be coached. So when I'm looking at clients, that is actually one of the markers on my discovery call is, do I believe that you can be coached? Do you have the capacity or skill set in order to be coached? Because it is that two-way street. We don't sit in sessions and I just tell you what to do.
Yeah.
In fact, it's very much the opposite. So if you don't have the ability and desire to practice the skills in order to be coached, it becomes very, very challenging to really get the most out of the sessions.
Yeah. Has there been a client that you thought would be a great client and ended up falling short, falling a little flat? And
yes.
If so, like what did that relate? How did that, like, not maybe break up, but what did that look like when you went through that?
How'd that firing look?
Yeah.
So I was fortunate in that happened kind of earlier in my career, but it was very much, it was difficult because also earlier in my career, I have to help everyone. I had not landed on, I have a specific niche and where I can, and being okay with, I can help people the most. So what did it look like? It looked like an awful conversation. It looked like 2 weeks of me wringing my hands about how I would do it and how I would say it and what it would mean and how much shade they would throw at me, you know, on social or on my LinkedIn or everything else. You know what happened? They felt it too. They were like, oh, what a relief. Ready. And that's I often find at times with a lot of things. Just tell them.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care if it's your husband, wife, girlfriend, partner, business person. Just tell them. If for nothing else, we are holding the problem in us. And the reality is, just get it out there. And then let's do something with it. Right? You know, I mean, if you have some problem behind the bar, you don't want to hear about it tomorrow. You want to hear about it right then. I'm not interested in blaming you for bringing the problem to me.
Yeah.
I'm interested in us solving the problem. Hey, bonus if you have a solution. Great, thank you for that. If it's in your wherewithal to do so, but if nothing else, let's not do ostrich and head in the sand. Let's get it out. Let's illuminate it and then get it done. Because at the end, anyone worth their salt knows that there's no perfection. You can't do it alone. We're here to do it together.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
What are some of the things that maybe I didn't ask yet, like that would be helpful to the listeners? Because one of the reason I started this is because everyone is typically behind the world is becoming more and more behind their computers.
Yep. And
it's hard to get people out into the world these days. And so I'm trying to cater to that a little bit with this podcast, but
yeah, but let's talk a little bit about the vision you kind of described to me, and as we work through it, and the one thing that really touched me was your desire and I guess self-assigned responsibility to be I'm going to be a little pun here, be a beacon in your own community, right? You know, you came to me, you said, Henry, I need to give back to my community. Through the podcast, through the beacon, how I do my thing. So I guess one of the questions is, where did that desire come from? And did it manifest at a certain point? Has it always been there? Where did that come from?
I think that, when I was coming up in hospitality and in fine dining restaurants, the word mentor and these types of buzzwords weren't necessarily available to us. So, but watching, like some of I'm actually having my mentor on next week, Bobby Stuckey. Yeah. And another guy next week who's like, so much respect for, Juan Pedro. I'm having some really, really awesome people on next week. But seeing the results of how they approach their relationships and then the fruit that blossoms from the tree, that was and has been and will continue to be what inspires me. Because now I'm actually in a position to offer the tree and the sun and the water, and soon, and I'm starting to see kind of like the fruit start to blossom and the fruit start to really become ripe, and really some of my closest colleagues flourish. And that's really, I think that's really the anchor to why, is because I've seen the results. Did I answer? I think that.
Well, of
that
course
answers,
you did.
Yeah.
So now let's so those are nice sentiments, and we've got the podcast. But what's your day to day around that? Like, how are you manifesting that day to day? How are you supporting others day to day in order to do that?
Yeah, day to day is hard because it's hard to identify that day to day, because I really aspire to touch lives day to day, but it's obviously not possible for life. But one thing that I have offered to the team at Beacon is that I'm available, and some have taken me up on it. Two specifically have taken me up on that and taken the time and helping and guiding them, and they have dreams, goals, ambitions, and I just love talking about that with people, how bright people's eyes get when they have a dream and a passion. I also pick up the phone a lot. People do call me just to say hi, how you doing, and to use a really awful phrase, pick my brain.
Sure.
And I offer that all the time. And I look at it as an opportunity to give back, even if you never know how you touch someone's life.
That's very true.
And you never know the advice you give someone, what they do with that. Hopefully it's positive and it provides their own fruit, but you never know. And so I think that it's just being very simple in my approach, which is just being a human being that's available.
Well, there you go. And that's so crucial, because there's so many people, and I had this when I started coaching. Who am I to coach you? Right? Who am I to coach that executive? Who am I to coach this athlete? Who am I to coach this museum? Like, who am I? I don't necessarily understand their world. I haven't done everything they've done. Who am I to do that? And then you start to realize, wait a second, why am I not?
Yeah.
It's very easy for us. It's very easy for people to tamp down how much they have to offer. Everyone is a teacher. Everyone's a teacher. Everyone has something to teach you. People say, oh, this person is horrible. Great. They just taught you how you don't want to be.
Yeah.
Everyone's a teacher. And when you start to look at everyone like that, titles don't matter, degrees don't matter, bank accounts don't matter, cars don't matter. None of that stuff matters. And you start to realize that by the very fact that you come out and offer, you can touch lives. You can make a difference. You can really help people in ways that you would never think of, because everyone assumes that, oh, how I want to be helped, and they oftentimes go that way. But just offering yourself truly and purely, let the other people decide how they want to take that, right? Don't do it for them. Let them do it. You're infinite energy. They are infinite energy. So just allow that and allow them to go from there. And if you're doing it with good intent, miracles happen.
I think that there is a reason why you're in a position to coach, and I'd like to believe I am too, to certain individuals that want it. One is you're a great listener, and two is you ask great questions. You can't ask great questions if you're not a great listener, right? And so those two things go hand in hand. And any good coach, if anyone's out there looking for a coach, these are what they should. Those two things alone, what they should be looking for, not credentials. Do you vibe? Is there that energetic exchange that's positive? Chemistry. But I do think those two things go hand in hand with just living a great life as well. And being present with wherever you're standing.
Absolutely. This idea of, I had a gentleman who's wanted to do a discovery call, and he said, what's the difference between you and a therapist? And I've had therapy. I've had about 10 years of cognitive therapy, and it was brilliant. She was an excellent therapist. And I often, shortchange it, is that oftentimes when you have a therapist, many people are looking for the why. Why am I like this? Why did this happen? They're looking for that. In my case, it's, what do you want to do? Like it all happened. And it doesn't mean that I'm not diminishing trauma or pain or any of those things. And so whatever you need to do that. But where I am, and this goes back to not coaching everyone.
Yeah.
Are you ready to do? Are you ready to take where you are and go to that next thing? If you're willing, are you ready to, and whatever that process is, to take all of that stuff and put it on the shelf, honor it for what it is, but then we're gonna
be the
move
witness.
forward. Yeah, but it's there, and all that happened and everything else. But we're gonna go. I'm going to go even despite that. I'm going to go even if I haven't fully resolved that, right? So this is why I often tell people, hey, that's something that I can't coach you through. Please seek some other help for that. I have no problem doing that. I don't hoard clients. I don't hoard. There's too much abundance. There's too much out there. Part of my work is making sure that people are getting what they need. And if it isn't coming from me, then where else can it come from?
Wow. What do we miss? How can we help you, Henry? Like, what can
besides?
What can we do?
Just being here is fantastic. I've only been in Denver for now coming up on 6 months, so I'm still learning all the ins and outs. And thank you to. I want to do a quick shout out to some of my dear friends, Mike and Steph McGurran. I love you both. They are my centerpiece back from Winter Music Conference back in 2010.
Yeah.
I met them, and they started my Denver journey of coming here 2-3 times a year and introducing me to people. And as soon as I moved here, they immediately exploded my community, and that's how I met you and met Robert and met so many other people. So I think just being the opportunity to meet more people, to be able to find out where I can serve, and honestly kind of follow your good example of how can I help this community and move from there. Because if I'm going to live here, then I should contribute and I should collaborate.
You plan on staying for a while?
I've got at least another year of my lease, and I think that there's at least another 3 or 4 years in me. And if nothing else, it's probably, hey, I have this here, and I'm looking at some places in Mexico or whatever as a little getaway and do some work down there.
Yeah.
But Denver's so rad. I mean, you're a bunch of savages out here. It's like, hey, why are we going to lift this heavy thing? Because it's heavy, and I love that. And I came here I started learning snowboarding at 50 years old and decided that snowboarding was a good idea. And why not be an hour away from Winter Park and a couple hours away from some world-class snowboarding? So I'm pretty psyched about being here. So awesome. I'm loving it.
Well, you've been a huge feather in our cap. So thank you so much, and a big asset to not only our crew but Denver at large. And
that's awesome. Thank you.
And whatever we can do to support you, where you have our attention.
Great, absolutely, awesome. I believe it. And if you want to find me, you can check out my website. Yep, it's www.hm3.io. So that's HM.
We'll put it on
there.
Notes.
Yep, you can check me there. And I'm always happy to have a conversation, a call, and talk to people about the work, but also just about connecting, right? Because you and I both know you're in the business of it. I was in the business, hospitality industry for a while. Connection is the first start for everything.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I have one last question.
Sure.
You were on the last podcast you were on?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that. I thought it was very interesting, and I don't know if I came out of it totally understanding.
Yeah, sure.
What you were talking about.
Yeah, so I was on a podcast from my barber shop. Obviously, not obviously, but amazingly enough, and they do a weekly podcast, and it's called Supremely Faded. And it's a collection of barbers that kind of sit around and just chop it up. And they had an interest in psychedelics because I do some psychedelic integration work.
What does that mean?
So basically what I do is there's a couple things. If you are a potential client who has had a psychedelic experience, like you've utilized psychedelics, whether it be casually or maybe not casually, and you're interested in utilizing them to better serve your work, your efforts, building your organization, and the power that comes from that, we can do some work together. If you are interested in utilizing psychedelics while in session, because obviously certain psychedelics are decriminalized here, you can take those psychedelics and then we can be in session together. And what I have found is that some of my clients who have been long-standing psychonauts have utilized psychedelics for healing, for introspection, and all these other things. They're like, I could use it to build my business. I was like, yeah. we can do that too. Like, it's so powerful. I started my psychedelic journey back in 2011. Went to South America, did 7 ayahuasca ceremonies in 12 nights. Maybe not the entryway I would recommend for everyone, but it started me on now a decade plus journey of 100 plus ceremonies in 6 different countries. Wow. And with a variety of different modalities. And it's been such a powerful thing that what I wanted to talk about with this group, with this podcast, is that this marks the 50th year anniversary of Project MKUltra. And if you don't know what Project MKUltra, you can look it up, but it was basically the CIA funded project that utilized humans to test for a truth serum drug, is what they were trying to do in response to what they thought the Russians had during the Cold War. But
African American specifically.
Mostly African American prisoners, done without their consent. They also took African Americans who were drug users. They actually traded their use, and they traded them drugs in order to utilize them. So they would trade heroin in order for them to try to experiment on them. They also experimented on a few other groups. They also experimented on a very collective Caucasian group that was given medical support, facilities. They knew what they were doing. So this went on, and there were approximately 140 sub-projects that came out of that. And this went on for 20 years. It wasn't closed down until 1973. Damn. It was unfortunate that when I went to the MAPS conference, I didn't hear anything about it. No one mentioned it. No one talked about it.
And that was the anniversary, a big anniversary.
It's a big anniversary. Years, and while I'm not looking for anyone I'm not looking for reparations, I'm not looking for revenge or anything else, but what I want to make sure is that no other group ever finds themselves at the on the wrong end of that particular stick. And so as we start to figure out how psychedelics are going to be legalized, what legislation is going to be around them, how they're going to be offered, how they're going to be measured, and all these things, I really want to make sure that every group and every person recognizes and knows that everyone had psychedelics in their past, right? Every cultural group has had some access to it. They've utilized it in ceremony, for death, for birth, for growth, coming of age. I invite you, I plead with you, go find out how your culture utilized it. And I love the fact that people love the indigenous species and celebrate the brown folks that have them. That's great. That's awesome. But you had them too. Find out how your families and how your culture did it, so that then when we all come back to the table about how we're going to figure this all out collectively, everyone's coming from a really good place of empowerment, a really good place of ownership. Yeah. And they can take that, because if we're not careful, this magic, these substances, these teachers that we commune with, they could be taken from us. And the fact that African Americans often would look at psychedelics as a white person's drug, as an experimental drug on us, all of a sudden you have this entire community, millions of people in the United States, who don't believe that psychedelics are for them. It was taken from them. And I, in my own journeys, have seen how much it has done for me. We now see how much it's doing for others. And for an entire ethnic group to not believe that they deserve it because of the actions of a few hundred people, I just couldn't let that stand without saying something. So if nothing else, I just wanted people to know.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that we got that last question out of the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
It's really nice to have you and all these flies.
You know what? I'm just like, be cool. Just be cool. Be cool about it.
This is their first appearance. I wish I'd have got some notice. But,
you had a few extra guests on the podcast.
Yeah. Actually, I was at my phone's over there. I was going to actually show you the last text I texted myself. That's how I take notes. It's awful. It's pretty fucking hilarious. But it says, flies, beacon. No, it was last Friday.
Check.
So,
check.
Yeah, I'm a little behind the 8 ball on my notes.
We'll work on that next session.
Yeah, brutal.
Yeah.
You guys have all been great guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Me, the flies, everyone else. It's a pleasure. Thank you, brother.
Much love. Thank you.
Thank you.